All right, so Dr. J, how does the gardener and the rose approach work with couples?
So you may have seen this as the gardener and the flower, or there's a bunch of different spins on this. I call it the gardener and the rose because my wife and I are following it, and she's a rose, not just any flower. So, I'm just going to use this as an example, but you can use it with any life. My wife and I were both PhDs. And when you have two PhDs in a couple, it's very, very hard, if not impossible, to find two careers at the same level, at the same time, at the same place. In academia, they will say you have the person who got the job, and then you have a trailing spouse, which really just sounds miserable. Like, we're going to make you a job because we really like your wife. How do you feel like less wanted? Like that's kind of what that feels like. And the reality is, what job makes sense for me or my wife, and where we physically located, would be a different thing. I'm running a financial planning firm focused on child-free and childless folks in a post-Roe world in Mississippi, which is where the Dobbs decision came out of, and also is the poorest state in the country. That probably is not the right choice of location for me. Let's just be real. But my wife got a great job opportunity, and we picked up our dogs and our cat and moved 1,200 miles. Now, by the way, got to see fun. 2 mastiffs in the back of a Prius. One in the back, one in the back seat. You see the head sticking out, 1,200 miles. People gave us some serious looks on that one. So here's the thing. The way the gardener and the rose works is one person's growing, that's the rose, and one person's the gardener providing the support. Now, support can mean a lot of things. Maybe financial, may not, but it's also all the stuff the rose needs to grow. Like taking care of the house, the yard, helping with their work. Our society says, oh, well, you can move ahead, blah, blah, blah. But it's still set up really for couples where where they have somebody at home helping so the other person can grow. And by the way, not going to get into gender roles or any of that. There's a whole bunch of history there that's not fun. But the reality is, if you really want to get ahead in your career, you need support. And if you're single, that's really hard. You're going to have to pay for the support. If you're in a couple, part of the intent is, hey, we're going to do this, and then we're going to switch. So you're the rose for a while, I'm the gardener, and then we switch. Katie, which person do you think it's harder on, the gardener or the rose?
I would say, having been in both situations, I have a harder time being the rose, personally.
99 times out of 100, that's the answer. Is the rose is the harder one to be. Because can I really be selfish? Yes, that's part of the intent, is that the rose is growing and we know that and we're providing support. Now, here's the fun part. Anytime I go with a couple and say, hey, we'll talk about this garden and rose thing, they'll know immediately which one of them needs to grow and be the rose. Obvious. And the gardener will say, I will provide 100% support. And then the rose goes, yeah, but I'm not sure I could do it. Or that self-doubt steps in, or the pressure.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to make changes, and I think it's also hard to rely on someone. My husband and I have had a number of these shifts throughout our marriage where we've kind of changed roles. So I think we've done this a lot.
Yeah. I think one of the things I want people to do is to make it intentional. We are going to do this and talk about it. Talk about what the rose needs, what the gardener needs to provide support. By the way, as you get more money, you literally can hire out some of the gardening roles. I pay somebody to help clean the house. I don't want to do toilets. Okay, that's just kind of how it is. I'd rather work an extra hour and have somebody do that. But it's about having this discussion saying, hey, we're going to do this for a period of time and then switch. So my wife and I have said, okay, next 15 years, she gets to follow her career wishes, be the rose, achieve whatever she wants. And then in 15 years, I'm the rose, and that means we're going to be on a boat traveling the world. Doesn't have to be a career. That's how I'm growing, is I'm going to go out and do that. Now, there are some days I swear she doesn't believe me. I said, hey, 15 years from now, I'm jumping on the boat. You can come with me if you'd like, or, that's your choice. And she's younger than I am, so I have a feeling she's going to still want to work. That's fine. She can work from the boat. That's part of this gardener and the rose, is to have an acknowledgement that we're going to take turns. It allows the rose to be more selfish, although it's not a bad term. Kind of just focus in on them and their career and their growth. Now, I don't know that I would always suggest to people like my wife and I. We're on a 15-year swap. That's a long swap. Like 5, 7 years, kind of that's a good swap. But it just happened to be because of careers and you know age and all that. That works out fine. But the whole point is to have that sport. Now we have a separate video on taking a sabbatical, and one of the things you can do with the rose is say, okay, cool, you take 6 months and find yourself. Take a look at the separate video on that, and then what happens is the rose might take off 5, 6 years down the road, switch. Now the gardener takes the sabbatical and they become the rose. And now we have a healthy relationship. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, can't like you be part rose and part gardener? Like, isn't there a balance in the middle? What do you think, Katie?
I mean, I think it depends on the situation. I think, like, thinking back to when my husband and I have kind of had these shifts, we definitely will talk about it at the beginning and say, okay, here's what's going to be happening. How do we need to realign everything? So we've had different arrangements, but we'll usually figure out like who is responsible for housework, who's responsible for paying the bills, who's responsible for this, and so I think we've had different mixes along the way.
You said, hey, being the rose might be harder. Is it harder to be the rose or is it harder to kind of be the rose? And here's where I'm going with this. When people are like, well, we can kind of split this. We can both be a little bit of the rose. I feel like it causes some conflict because like I'm trying to grow and they're trying to grow and you know like the toilet's overflowing because nobody's done like the work there. I mean, at least in my experience in coaching, I haven't found couples that have been able to like both be the rose at once unless they had a lot of money to pay for gardeners. By the way, that literally means gardeners in those cases. But I mean, that is the only way that happens. In parents, you'll often see this gardener and the rose approach also, but one is taking care of the kids and one's doing the professional career, and I'm not saying one's harder or easier. That's a separate conversation. It's not for this group. But what happens there is we're not, it's very rare to see the flip. Yeah. So my wife, she has a couple of friends. They're both MD PhDs, which by the way, if you want to talk about, people have gone to way too much school, MD PhDs, double doctorates. One of them's is at home taking care of the kids. The other one's following their career. That's hard. Well, when you're child free or childless, you have the choice to do whatever you want. And if being the rose doesn't bring in more money, that's okay too. And that's weird for people to get. Like, I want to move ahead, but I want to, like, I'm going to go spend a whole lot of money on a boat, which, they always joke about a boat being a boat shaped hole in the water you throw money into. I mean, it's not a good financial decision, but it's better for me and what I want to do. So it doesn't always have to be about that, but it does have to be a discussion between you and your spouse to make sure it's done right.